Story 1. The House on Evergreen Lane. James Whitmore had been a real estate agent for 12 years, and he'd learned to trust his instincts about properties. But on December 18th, 2019, when he received the listing for 4247 Evergreen Lane, something felt immediately wrong. The house had been on and off the market for 30 years, never staying with one family for more than 8 months. The current owners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons, were desperate to sell before Christmas. They offered it at half the market value. The colonial-style home sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in suburban Connecticut, surrounded by newer developments. Its white paint had yellowed with age, and the black shutters hung at odd angles. What struck James most was how the Christmas decorations on neighboring houses seemed to deliberately avoid facing it. Wreaths and lights pointed away, as if the entire street had silently agreed not to acknowledge 4247 Evergreen Lane. Mrs. Henderson met him at the door, her hands shaking as she handed over the keys. She was 73, with gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. "We need to leave before Christmas Eve," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Before midnight on Christmas Eve. It's very important you understand that." James smiled professionally, assuming she was simply eccentric. "I'll do my best to find you a buyer quickly." "You don't understand." She gripped his arm with surprising strength. "No one should be in this house on Christmas Eve after midnight. No one." Her husband appeared behind her, equally pale, and they left without another word, climbing into a packed car and driving away as if fleeing a fire. The house showed well enough during the daytime. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, original hardwood floors, and a stone fireplace in the living room. James took photos and measurements, noting the odd details. Every room had a clock, and every single one had stopped at 12:17. The Christmas tree in the corner of the living room was artificial, but it had been left fully decorated with antique ornaments that looked handmade. Beautiful, delicate things with painted faces that seemed to follow him as he moved through the room. He scheduled 5 showings before Christmas Eve. The first 3 families left within 20 minutes, offering polite excuses about the layout or the outdated kitchen. But James saw the way they hurried to their cars, the way parents pulled children closer. The 4th showing was on December 23rd, with a young couple, Derek and Shannon Martin, looking for their first home. They loved it immediately. Shannon admired the original molding and the spacious kitchen. Derek was sold on the basement workshop and the large backyard. They didn't seem to notice the clocks or feel the creeping cold that had nothing to do with winter air. James felt relief and unease in equal measure as they signed the offer that afternoon. They wanted to spend Christmas Eve in their new home, even before the paperwork was finalized. The Hendersons accepted immediately, practically throwing the keys at James. "You should tell them," his wife said that evening as he recounted the day. About what Mrs. Henderson said. "Tell them what? That an old woman gave me a cryptic warning? They'll think I'm trying to sabotage the sale." But doubt gnawed at him. He tried calling Mrs. Henderson, but their phone was disconnected. He drove by their forwarding address. It was a motel 3 states away. On Christmas Eve, James couldn't shake his anxiety. At 8 p.m., he drove to Evergreen Lane. The Martins' car was in the driveway, warm light glowing from the windows. He sat in his car for 10 minutes, debating. Finally, he walked to the door and knocked. Shannon answered, wearing a festive sweater and holding a glass of wine. "James, what a surprise. Come in, come in." The house felt different at night. The temperature seemed to drop with each step inside. Derek emerged from the kitchen with a cheese board, and they'd clearly been decorating. Fresh garland wound up the staircase, and they'd added their own ornaments to the antique tree. "I know this is unusual," James began, "but the previous owners mentioned something about Christmas Eve, about not being here after midnight." Derek laughed. Superstitious, were they? This house is perfect. We're not going anywhere. James tried to explain, but his words sounded foolish even to himself. He left at 9:30, their polite dismissal clear. He drove home, but couldn't settle. At 11:45 p.m., he told his wife he was going back. "James, you barely know these people." "I know, but I can't explain it. Something's wrong with that house." He arrived at 11:53 p.m. The street was silent, blanketed in fresh snow that had begun falling an hour earlier. Every house glowed with Christmas lights except 4247, which seemed to absorb the darkness around it. The lights were still on inside, but as he approached, he saw them flicker. He pounded on the door. "Derek, Shannon, you need to leave. Now." No answer. He tried the door. It was locked. Through the front window, he could see into the living room. The couple stood motionless in front of the Christmas tree, their backs to him. Not moving, not speaking, just standing. James checked his watch. 11:57 p.m. He ran to the back door, found it open, and rushed inside. The temperature had plummeted. His breath came out in frozen clouds, and ice crystals were forming on the walls. "Derek, Shannon!" He grabbed Derek's shoulder and spun him around. The man's face was slack, eyes open but unseeing, skin gray and cold. Shannon was the same. They weren't dead. They were somewhere else, their bodies left behind as empty shells. The ornaments on the tree began to rotate slowly, their painted faces turning toward him in unison. 11:59 p.m. James heard footsteps from upstairs. Slow, deliberate, descending the stairs. He looked at the staircase and saw them, translucent figures in old-fashioned Christmas attire, men, women, and children from different eras, all walking down in a solemn procession. Their faces were hollow, eyes black voids, mouths open in silent screams. The clock in the living room stopped at 12:17 for decades, suddenly ticked once, then again. James ran. He grabbed Derek's arm and pulled, but the man was impossibly heavy, rooted to the spot. The figures reached the bottom of the stairs, spreading through the living room. They began to circle the tree, their movements synchronized like a grotesque dance. 12 a.m. The house shuddered. Every clock began ticking in perfect unison. The ornaments spun faster, and the painted faces opened their mouths. A sound filled the air, something between singing and screaming, words in a language James didn't recognize but understood instinctively was wrong. The figures turned their attention to him. They moved closer, their forms becoming more solid with each step. James felt his body growing heavy, his thoughts sluggish. The cold wasn't just physical anymore. It was inside him, freezing his will, his desire to flee. One of the figures, a woman in a Victorian dress, reached out to touch his face. Her fingers were ice, and where they made contact, James felt himself slipping away, felt his consciousness being pulled towards something vast and hungry that existed in the space between 12 Bow and 12:17. With his last shred of will, James threw himself backward, breaking the contact. He hit the floor hard and scrambled toward the back door on his hands and knees. The figures glided after him, their silent mouths still forming those terrible words. He made it outside and ran through the snow, not looking back until he reached his car. Inside the house, through the window, he could see Derek and Shannon had joined the procession. They circled the tree with the others, their faces already beginning to hollow out, their movements taking on that same mechanical precision. James called 911, but when the police arrived, they found nothing wrong. Derek and Shannon were fine, they said, just sleeping upstairs, annoyed to be woken, but otherwise normal. James must have been mistaken, must have had too much holiday cheer. But James knew what he'd seen. He quit real estate the next day. The Martins lived in the house for 7 months before selling it at a significant loss, citing personal reasons. They both looked decades older than they had on Christmas Eve, their eyes haunted, their movements nervous and quick, always watching clocks. James drives by Evergreen Lane sometimes, unable to help himself. The house sits empty more often than not now, but every Christmas Eve, lights appear in the windows, though no one lives there. And if you watch closely at midnight, you can see figures moving inside, circling something, dancing to music only they can hear. The house is back on the market. The price keeps dropping. James sometimes gets calls asking if he'll list it. He refuses, because he knows that 4247 Evergreen Lane isn't looking for occupants. It's collecting them, one Christmas Eve at a time, adding them to a celebration that never ends. In those 17 minutes between midnight and 12:17, when something else owns that space, that house, and anyone foolish enough to be inside it. Story 2. The Christmas Tree Lot. Travis Bennett ran the last independent Christmas tree lot in Portland, Oregon, a family business passed down from his grandfather. Every year from Thanksgiving to Christmas Eve, he set up shop on the same corner lot where the Bennett family had sold trees since 1952. Travis was 41, divorced, and the tree lot was his entire life. He knew every variety of fir and pine, could spot a fresh tree from 50 yards, and prided himself on never selling a family a tree that wouldn't last through New Year's. The 2021 season started normally enough. Travis hauled in 200 trees from his farm in the Cascade foothills, arranged them by size and type, and opened for business on November 26th. The weather was typical Pacific Northwest December. Cold rain, gray skies, temperatures hovering just above freezing. Business was steady. Families came hunting for the perfect tree, and Travis guided them with practiced ease. On December 14th, a semi-truck arrived at 6 a.m., an hour before Travis usually opened. The driver, a thin man with a sharp face and eyes that didn't quite focus on anything, said he had a delivery. "Special order," the man said, consulting a clipboard. 20 premium noble firs, paid in advance. Travis frowned. "I didn't order any special delivery. I cut all my own trees." The driver shrugged. "Says here Travis Bennett, Cascade Corner, tree lot. Payment cleared 2 weeks ago." He showed Travis paperwork that did indeed have Travis's information and a signature that looked disturbingly like his own, though he had no memory of signing anything. The trees were magnificent, 12 feet tall, perfectly shaped, the bluish-green needles of noble firs, thick and lush. They smelled incredible, that sharp pine scent that defined Christmas. Travis couldn't explain the order, but the trees were paid for and too beautiful to refuse. He accepted the delivery, and the driver left without another word. Travis set up the special trees in a separate section, marking them as premium stock with higher prices. They sold faster than anything he'd ever stocked. Families were drawn to them, sometimes changing their minds about trees they'd already chosen to purchase one of the noble firs instead. By December 20th, all 20 were gone. That's when the calls started. The first was from Richard Chen, who'd bought one of the trees on December 15th. "There's something wrong with it," he said, his voice tight with an emotion Travis couldn't identify. "The ornaments, they keep moving. And we hear things at night, sounds coming from inside the tree." Travis assured him he'd bring a replacement, assuming thus tree had insects or had dried out despite its apparent freshness. But when he arrived at the Chen house that evening, the tree looked perfect, fresh, full, beautifully decorated. The family stood in the living room, not too close to it, watching it with an expression Travis could only describe as fear. "It started on the second night," Richard's wife, Maria, said. "We heard scratching like something was trying to get out, and the ornaments, watch them." They stood in silence. After 5 minutes, Travis was about to suggest they were imagining things when he saw it. A glass ball ornament rotated slowly despite no air current, no movement in the room. Then another shifted, sliding slightly down its branch. not falling, moving deliberately. "Jesus," Travis whispered. A sound emerged from deep within the tree's branches, something between a whisper and a breath. The needles rustled though every window was closed, every door shut. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Travis approached the tree carefully. The smell was wrong now. Underneath the pine was something else, something organic and rotten. He reached into the branches, and his hand touched something that wasn't wood. It was soft, yielding, warm like skin. He jerked back. "I'll take it. I'll replace it right now." They helped him haul the tree outside, all of them moving quickly, desperate to get it out of the house. As Travis loaded it into his truck, he could have sworn he saw something moving deep in its core, a shadow that didn't match any branch structure. Before he could make it back to the lot, his phone rang again. Another customer, Jennifer Paulson. Then another, the Hayes family. By midnight, 12 of the 20 families had called with similar stories. Trees that made sounds, ornaments that moved, temperature drops, and worst of all, shapes in the branches. Figures that appeared when you looked at them from the corner of your eye, but vanished under direct observation. Travis collected 7 of the trees that night, loading them back onto his truck. They sat in the bed, arranged together, and Travis couldn't shake the feeling that they were communicating somehow, their branches touching, needles interweaving in patterns that seemed intentional. At the lot, he unloaded them into a far corner, away from the remaining unsold stock. He tried to call the delivery company, but the number on the paperwork was disconnected. The address led to an empty lot in an industrial area. On December 22nd, 2 days before Christmas, Travis was closing up when he noticed all 7 collected trees had moved. Not far, just repositioned, turned to face his small office trailer. He was sure he'd left them in a different arrangement. And there were marks in the gravel, drag marks, as if the trees had pulled themselves across the ground. That night, Travis stayed at the lot, sleeping in his trailer with a baseball bat beside him. At 2:17 a.m., he woke to sounds outside, footsteps crunching on gravel, multiple sets, walking in circles around his trailer. He looked out the small window and saw them. The trees were upright, standing on their trunks like legs, moving with an unnatural, jerking gait. All 7 of them circling his trailer in a slow procession. As they walked, their branches scraped against the metal walls, creating a sound like fingernails on glass, deliberate and rhythmic. Travis grabbed his phone to call 911, but it wouldn't turn on despite being fully charged an hour ago. The trees moved closer, tightening their circle. He could see faces now, formed in the patterns of bark and branch, twisted expressions of rage and hunger. The smell of rot was overwhelming. He burst out of the trailer with his bat, swinging wildly. The bat connected with the nearest tree, and it was like hitting flesh. The tree shuddered and made a sound, a low moan that came from everywhere and nowhere. All 7 trees turned toward him in unison. Travis ran. He made it to his truck, fumbled with his keys, and started the engine as branches crashed against the windows. He peeled out of the lot, looking in his rearview mirror to see the trees pursuing him, moving faster now, their trunks bending and flexing like knees, branches reaching out like arms. He didn't stop until he reached a 24-hour diner, 15 miles away. He sat in the parking lot, shaking until dawn. When he finally worked up the courage to return to his lot at 8 a.m., everything looked normal. The 7 trees stood where he'd originally placed them, immobile, silent, just trees. But his trailer door was open, and inside, he found pine needles scattered across every surface, arranged in patterns that looked almost like words in a language he didn't recognize. And carved into his desk, deep gouges in the wood, was a date. December 24th, 12 a.m. Travis called the remaining 13 families who'd bought the trees. 5 didn't answer. 8 confirmed the trees were still in their homes. And yes, strange things were happening. But it was almost Christmas, and their children were excited, and surely it was just their imagination. He tried to warn them, tried to explain what he'd seen, but he sounded insane even to himself. On December 23rd, he closed the lot and drove to each house, begging families to let him take the trees. Most refused. The Hayes family agreed, but when Travis tried to move their tree, it wouldn't budge. The trunk had somehow fused with their floor, roots growing down through carpet and wood into the foundation. Christmas Eve arrived. Travis sat in his apartment, unable to eat, unable to think about anything except those families. At 11 p.m., he received the first text message, "Help us," from Richard Chen's number, then another from Jennifer Paulson. "It's happening." Then silence. At 12:17 a.m., Travis's phone rang 20 times in succession, each call from a different number, all families who'd bought the trees. He answered each one, but no one spoke. He could only hear sounds in the background, scratching, breathing, something wet moving, and underneath it all, a low humming that might have been singing. By morning, the news reported strange incidents across Portland. 13 families experienced carbon monoxide poisoning on Christmas Eve, or so the official reports claimed. All survived, but all were hospitalized with severe psychological trauma. They reported similar hallucinations, their Christmas trees coming alive, branches that grabbed, needles that cut like blades, and worst of all, the feeling that something ancient and hungry had used the trees to enter their homes. Travis never reopened his lot. The 7 trees he'd collected, they vanished from the lot on Christmas morning. He reported them stolen, but the police found evidence that confused everyone. The trees had been removed from the inside. The ground where they'd stood showed root structures going down 30 feet, far deeper than any Christmas tree's roots could reach. And mixed with the dirt and pine needles were other things. Fragments of bone, pieces of cloth that carbon dated to the 1950s, and a child's ornament with a name inscribed on it, Sarah Bennett, 1952, Travis's aunt, who disappeared the year his grandfather started the tree lot. Travis lives in Seattle now, working in an office, far from trees and Christmas. But every December, he gets a call from an unknown number. When he answers, he hears that sound, branches scraping, needles rustling, and underneath it all, that humming that might be singing. And sometimes, when he looks out his window on December nights, he sees trees in the distance standing upright, swaying in patterns that have nothing to do with wind, moving with purpose toward houses with lit windows and decorated trees, collecting something, fulfilling some bargain, made long ago that the Bennett family has been paying for across generations. Story 3, The Angel on the Tree. Gregory Walsh was a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, in a small apartment in Providence, Rhode Island. His wife had died 3 years earlier from cancer, and Gregory had thrown himself into making every holiday special for Emma, trying to fill the void her mother had left. Christmas was Emma's favorite time of year, and Gregory spared no expense or effort to make it magical. On December 10th, 2018, they went to an antique store downtown to find a tree topper. Their old star had broken, and Emma insisted they needed something special for their 7-foot Douglas fir. The store, Hartwell & Sons Antiques, occupied a narrow building that seemed to lean slightly to one side. Inside, it smelled of old wood and mothballs, crammed with furniture and decorations from decades past. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Hartwell, showed them to the Christmas section in the back. Boxes of ornaments, strings of lights, and various tree toppers filled dusty shelves. Emma explored while Gregory watched, and then she gasped with delight. "Daddy, look!" She held an angel tree topper, 12 inches tall, with porcelain face and hands, dressed in a white gown with golden wings. The face was beautiful but strange, with eyes that seemed slightly too large, a smile that curved just a bit too wide. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly very old, likely from the early 1900s. "How much?" Gregory asked Mr. Hartwell. The old man's expression flickered with something, relief perhaps. "For your daughter, $20. Please take it. It's been here too long." Emma hugged the angel to her chest. "She's perfect. Can we name her? I want to call her Celeste." That evening, Gregory lifted Emma so she could place Celeste atop their tree. The angel settled perfectly, and when they turned on the tree lights, something remarkable happened. The angel seemed to glow from within, not just reflecting light, but emanating it, a soft radiance that filled the living room with warmth. Emma clapped her hands, delighted, and Gregory had to admit it was beautiful. That night, Emma asked if she could sleep in the living room so she could see the tree. Gregory agreed, setting up her sleeping bag near the couch. He checked on her before going to bed and found her awake, staring up at the angel. "She's watching over me," Emma whispered, "like Mommy used to." Gregory's heart broke and mended simultaneously. "Yes, sweetheart, like Mommy." The first few nights were wonderful. Emma seemed happier than she'd been since her mother's death, sleeping peacefully by the tree. But on the fourth night, Gregory woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of Emma talking to someone. He walked to the living room and found her sitting cross-legged in front of the tree, looking up at the angel, speaking in a low voice. "Emma, what are you doing?" She turned to him with a dreamy expression. "Talking to Celeste. She tells me things." "What kind of things?" "Secrets about Mommy, about where she is now." Gregory felt cold. "Sweetheart, it's just an angel decoration. It can't really talk." Emma smiled, but it wasn't quite her smile. "That's what she said you'd say." He convinced Emma to return to her bedroom that night, but the next evening, he found her in the living room again. This time, she was standing directly in front of the tree, her head tilted back at an uncomfortable angle, staring at the angel. The angel's face seemed different somehow, the smile wider, the eyes following him as he moved across the room. "Emma, come on. Bedtime." "Celeste says I should stay. She says she can bring Mommy back if I listen to her." Gregory's patience snapped. "That's enough. Angels aren't real, and decorations definitely don't talk. You're having dreams, that's all." Emma's face crumpled, and she ran to her room crying. Gregory felt like a monster, but he was also deeply unsettled. He approached the tree, looking up at the angel. In the soft glow of the lights, the porcelain face seemed almost alive, the paint so detailed he could see tiny veins in the whites of the eyes, individual lashes, pores in the skin. He reached up to adjust it, and the moment his fingers touched the gown, he felt a shock run through his hand, up his arm, into his chest. For a split second, he saw something, a room he didn't recognize, filled with children standing in a circle, and in the center, the angel, life-sized, moving among them with jerking, unnatural movements. Gregory yanked his hand back. He was breathing hard, his heart hammering. He grabbed the angel, planning to throw it away. But as he pulled it from the tree, Emma screamed from her bedroom, a sound of pure terror and pain. He dropped the angel and ran to her. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide, tears streaming down her face. "She hurt me. When you touched her, she hurt me." "Who hurt you?" "Emma, nobody's here." "Celeste, she's in my head now, Daddy. She's in my head, and she won't leave." Gregory held his daughter, feeling her trembling against him. When he looked toward the living room, he could see the tree from the hallway, and the angel was back on top, though he'd left it on the floor. It was upright, positioned perfectly, glowing brighter than before. The next day, Gregory called in sick to work and took Emma to a doctor. She seemed fine physically, but she was withdrawn, constantly whispering to herself. The doctor suggested stress, grief counseling, normal explanations. But Gregory knew better now. He tried everything he could think of. He covered the angel with a cloth, but Emma removed it during the night. He tried taking the angel outside to the dumpster, but when he opened the trash bag later to verify it was gone, the angel was back in his apartment, sitting on the coffee table, facing him. He even drove to a lake, intending to throw it in the water, but his car died a mile from shore. And when he finally got it started again, the angel was in his passenger seat. Emma grew worse. She stopped eating, spent all day in front of the tree, speaking in languages Gregory didn't recognize. Her skin took on a waxy quality, and her eyes became unfocused. When he tried to pull her away from the tree, she became violent with supernatural strength, scratching and biting until he had to let her go. On December 22nd, Gregory woke to find Emma's bedroom empty. He ran to the living room and found her standing on a chair, reaching up toward the angel. But she wasn't trying to touch it. She was merging with it. Her fingers were elongating, becoming porcelain, her skin taking on that same painted quality. She was smiling that too wide smile. "Emma, no!" Gregory grabbed her and pulled her down. The transformation reversed, her skin becoming flesh again. But her eyes when she looked at him were empty, all his daughter gone from them. "She wants me," Emma said in a voice that wasn't entirely hers. "She's been alone for so long, Daddy, so many years with no one. She wants me to stay, with her, to be her, so she can leave." Gregory finally understood. The angel wasn't a decoration. It was a prison, and something inside was desperate to escape, desperate enough to trade places with a lonely child who missed her mother. He called Mr. Hartwell, but the antique store's number was disconnected. He drove there to find the building empty, a for lease sign in the window. His questions to neighboring businesses revealed that Hartwell and Sons had closed 20 years ago. The building had been vacant ever since. Gregory researched the angel obsessively. He found newspaper articles from 1923 about a woman named Celeste Hartwell, who murdered 7 children in Providence before being killed by police. Her father, devastated and insane with grief, had her body cremated and claimed to have trapped her spirit in an angel figurine, believing he could somehow redeem her soul. The angel had passed through many hands over the decades. Every family reported the same pattern: children becoming obsessed, personality changes, and eventually disappearances. On Christmas Eve, Gregory made his decision. He couldn't destroy the angel. He'd tried fire, hammers, everything. It repaired itself, always perfect, always watching. But he could make a trade. That night, while Emma slept a drugged sleep, Gregory positioned himself in front of the tree. He looked up at the angel, at that beautiful, terrible face, and he spoke. "Take me instead. Leave my daughter alone, and I'll stay with you." The angel's eyes moved, locking onto his. The temperature plummeted. The lights on the tree flickered and died, and in the darkness, the angel began to glow with that inner light, brighter and brighter, until Gregory had to shield his eyes. He felt himself being pulled apart, his consciousness separating from his body. He saw the room from above, saw his body standing empty before the tree, saw Emma sleeping peacefully in her room. He felt himself being compressed, forced into something small and confined, trapped behind porcelain and paint and gold leaf. The next morning, Emma woke on Christmas to find her father standing in the living room, staring at the tree with empty eyes. He made her breakfast mechanically, spoke in short, strange sentences. The angel was gone from the tree, replaced by their old star. Emma found the angel wrapped in her father's closet, a note attached. For Emma, when she's ready to understand. "I love you. I'm still watching over you. Dad." Emma lives with her aunt now. Her father is in a care facility, unresponsive, his mind simply gone. The doctors have no explanation. Emma is 16 now, and the wrapped angel sits in her closet, unopened. But sometimes at night, she hears a voice, her father's voice, whispering from inside the package. "Don't open it, Emma. Never open it. I'm still here, keeping her company, keeping her from you. Just throw it away. Let us go." But Emma can't bring herself to dispose of it, because if she sends her father away, she'll be truly alone. So the angel remains, wrapped in paper, sitting in darkness, holding a father's consciousness prisoner, while something ancient and evil whispers to him in that confined space, year after year, promising relief that never comes, a Christmas present that no one should ever unwrap. Story 4. The Carol Singers. Nathan Pierce was a music teacher at Lincoln High School in Burlington, Vermont, and he took his holiday traditions seriously. Every year, he organized a caroling group of students and faculty to perform around the neighborhood on Christmas Eve. It was wholesome, nostalgic, and the community loved it. Nathan was 36, unmarried, dedicated to his students and his music. The 2020 season was different, of course. COVID restrictions had eased somewhat, but gatherings were still limited. Nathan decided to keep the tradition alive with a smaller group. Himself, 4 students, and 2 fellow teachers, 7 people total, all vaccinated, all masked when not singing, maintaining distance. They'd sing for the neighborhood, bring some joy to a difficult year. They met at the school parking lot on December 24th at 6 p.m. The students were excited. Kelly Morrison, a senior with a beautiful soprano voice, twins Jake and Josh Hartman, both tenors, and Melissa Chang, an alto who could harmonize with anyone. The other teachers were Patricia Dunn, who taught English, and Robert Forsyth, the history teacher who had a surprising bass voice. Nathan had mapped out their route, 12 houses in the historic district where Victorian homes still dominated, streets lined with old maples and oaks, sidewalks that buckled with age. It would take about 2 hours, then they'd return to Nathan's house for hot chocolate and cookies. They started at 6:30 p.m., the early winter darkness already complete. Their first house was the Kimballs, an elderly couple who came to the door with tears in their eyes. "We haven't heard carols in 2 years," Mrs. Kimball said. "This is wonderful." The group sang Silent Night, their voices blending perfectly in the cold air. Nathan felt that familiar warmth, the joy of making music, of bringing happiness. They moved to the next house, then the next, each performance well received. At the 5th house, something changed. The home belonged to the Caldwells, according to Nathan's list. But the house was dark, no decorations, no signs of life. They almost skipped it, but Kelly noticed movement in an upstairs window. "Someone's home. Let's sing for them anyway." They launched into "O Come All Ye Faithful," their voices rising into the night. Halfway through the carol, the front door opened, but no one emerged. The interior was completely dark, a rectangle of blackness. They continued singing, uncertain, and then a voice joined them from inside the house. A woman's voice, singing along in perfect pitch, matching their harmonies. But something was wrong with it. The tone was right, but the texture was off, as if the voice was passing through something, filtered through water or static. The students faltered, but Nathan gestured for them to continue. They finished the carol, and the voice from the darkness finished with them, holding the final note longer than humanly possible, letting it decay slowly into silence. Then the door closed without a word. "That was weird," Josh whispered. They moved on, but the mood had shifted. The night felt colder, the shadows between streetlights deeper. At the 7th house, the Brennan residence, no one answered their knock, but they heard singing from the backyard. Curious, they walked around the side of the house. The backyard was empty, but the singing continued. 4 voices, male and female, performing "God Rest Ya Merry Gentlemen" in perfect harmony. The voices came from nowhere and everywhere, surrounding them, moving through the air without a source. Nathan felt his skin crawl. The students huddled together. "Let's go," Patricia said, her voice shaking. They hurried back to the street, but the singing followed them, maintaining the same volume regardless of distance. The song finished, and silence dropped like a weight. At the 8th house, things got worse. An elderly man answered their knock, smiling warmly. "Oh, carolers! How wonderful! My wife would have loved this. She passed last Christmas, you see." They sang "The First Noel," and the man listened with tears streaming down his face. But behind him, deeper in the house, Nathan saw movement. A woman stood in the hallway, watching them. She wore a white nightgown, her hair long and gray. She was translucent, not quite there, and her mouth moved along with their words, singing silently. The old man didn't seem to notice her. When they finished, he thanked them profusely and closed the door. Through the window, Nathan watched as the man turned and embraced the transparent woman, holding empty air, swaying as if dancing. "Did you see her?" Kelly whispered. "In the house?" "I saw her," Nathan admitted. "Let's finish the route. Just 3 more houses." But he was lying. According to his map, they'd visited 8 houses. They'd planned for 12. But when he checked his phone, confused, the map showed they'd only visited 5 houses. The Caldwell house, the Brennan house, and the old man's home weren't on his original route. They didn't exist on his map at all. He checked the street sign. They were on Elmwood Avenue, correct. But the houses were different. The Caldwell house wasn't on his map or in his memory, and yet they'd just been there. He pulled up Google Maps on his phone. The Caldwell address didn't exist. The Brennan address showed as vacant land. "Nathan, what's wrong?" Robert asked. "I think we're lost." "How can we be lost? We've been following the street." Nathan couldn't explain. They continued walking, looking for the next house on his original list. But the addresses were wrong now, jumping from 847 to 963, with nothing in between. The houses they passed were dark or appeared abandoned. No Christmas lights, no signs of life. Then they heard the singing again, behind them, back the way they'd come. A full choir this time, dozens of voices performing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." The sound was beautiful and terrifying, moving toward them down the dark street. "Run," Nathan said. They ran, the students leading, the adults following. The singing grew louder, closer, the tempo increasing as if the singers were running too. Nathan risked a glance back and saw them. Figures in old-fashioned winter clothes, men in overcoats and hats, women in long dresses and cloaks, children in Victorian attire. They moved in a tight group, gliding over the sidewalk, their mouths open in song, eyes empty and black. The group of carolers turned a corner onto what should have been Washington Street, but instead found themselves on a road Nathan didn't recognize. The houses here were older, some in disrepair, some collapsed entirely. And everywhere, they saw more singers. Groups of them standing on porches, in yards, at intersections, all facing the fleeing group, all singing different carols in perfect time. Kelly tripped, and Jake helped her up. They ducked into an alley between 2 houses, hiding in the darkness. The singing continued all around them, echoing off walls, coming from above and below. "What's happening?" Melissa sobbed. "Where are we?" Nathan had no answers. He tried his phone, but there was no signal, and the map app showed only a blank screen. The time read 6:47 p.m., but they'd been caroling for over an hour. Time was wrong here, along with everything else. A child's voice spoke from the darkness beside them. "Are you lost?" They spun to see a girl, perhaps 10 years old, in a dress from the 1940s. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes were those same black voids. "We've been waiting for new singers. It's been so long since anyone new joined us." more figures emerged from the shadows of the alley. Men, women, children, all in clothes from different eras, all with those terrible empty eyes. They began to sing "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and the melody was beautiful, hypnotic. Nathan felt his lips moving, words coming unbidden, his voice joining theirs. He was singing with them, harmonizing, and it felt wonderful. The fear was fading, replaced by a warm certainty that this was right, this was where he belonged. Beside him, his students and colleagues were singing too, their expressions going slack, peaceful, becoming like the others. Some part of Nathan, a distant, panicking piece of his consciousness, screamed at him to stop. He bit his tongue hard, pain breaking through the spell. He grabbed Kelly's arm, shaking her. "Kelly, don't sing! Don't let them make you sing!" She blinked, awareness returning. He moved to the others, breaking their trance one by one. The figures around them frowned, their song taking on an angry edge. The temperature dropped, frost forming on walls, on their clothes, on exposed skin. "You have to sing," the child figure said, her voice layered with others, dozens speaking as one. "Everyone who comes here must join the carol. It's the only way back. You sing with us, you become us, and then you can leave. In a way. You'll always be singing, always caroling, waiting for the next group to join." Nathan understood then. They'd somehow crossed into a place where Christmas caroling never ended, where singers from decades or centuries past were trapped in an eternal performance, collecting new voices to join their choir. "No," Nathan said. "We're leaving right now." He led his group away from the figures, back into the street. The singers followed, their carol growing louder, more insistent. Every direction they turned revealed more singers, more empty eyes, more voices demanding they join the song. Nathan did the only thing he could think of. He began singing a carol himself, but he changed the words, improvising, breaking the pattern. "We are going home tonight, back to warmth and light. Leave this place of endless song. We are moving on." It wasn't eloquent, but it was different. His group joined him, creating their own carol, their own harmony. The figures recoiled, their perfect songs disrupted by this new melody. Gaps appeared in their formation. The group ran through the gaps, Nathan's improvised carol continuous, everyone contributing verses, nonsense words when necessary, anything to maintain their own song against the oppressive perfect harmonies surrounding them. They burst through a line of singers and found themselves suddenly on a familiar street. The high school was visible 2 blocks away. Behind them, the street they'd emerged from was gone, replaced by a normal intersection, normal houses with Christmas lights and decorations. They ran to the school parking lot, their voices finally stopping. The silence was shocking. They collapsed against cars, gasping, trembling. Nathan checked his phone. 7:23 p.m. Less than an hour had passed. "Did that really happen?" Josh asked. They all looked at each other, at their frightened faces, their frost-covered clothes, despite the relatively mild night. It had happened. They'd been somewhere else, somewhere that collected singers and kept them forever. Nathan canceled the caroling tradition that year, and every year since. His group never speaks about what happened, but sometimes, on cold December nights, they each hear singing in the distance, perfect harmonies, dozens of voices, performing songs that should bring joy, but instead fill them with dread. And sometimes, when they're alone, they feel the urge to sing along, to harmonize with those distant voices, to join that eternal Christmas performance. Nathan fights it every time, biting his tongue until it bleeds, humming nonsense songs, anything to avoid being pulled back to that place where carolers never stop singing, where Christmas Eve lasts forever, where the price of joining the perfect song is losing everything that makes you human, becoming another voice in an endless, beautiful, terrible choir. Story. 5. The Santa Claus at Pinewood Mall. Vincent Hardy had been a mall Santa for 15 years, working the holiday season at Pinewood Mall in suburban Atlanta. He was 58, overweight in a way that suited the role, with a naturally white beard he'd grown out specifically for the job. Vincent took his work seriously, treating each child with genuine warmth, making their visit to Santa memorable. For him, it wasn't just a seasonal job, it was a calling. The 2019 season started on November 29th. Vincent's Santa setup was elaborate. A large wooden throne on a raised platform, fake snow, animatronic reindeer, and twinkling lights everywhere. His elf assistant that year was a college student named Amy Chen, working the job to save money for spring semester. She was enthusiastic and good with kids, making Vincent's job easier. Everything was normal for the first 2 weeks. Hundreds of children visited, sitting on Vincent's lap, whispering wishes, posing for photos. The usual mix of excitement, shyness, and occasional meltdowns. Vincent loved it all. On December 12th, during a slow afternoon period, a man approached the Santa setup. He was tall, thin, wearing a dark suit that seemed too formal for the mall. His face was gaunt, with deep-set eyes that didn't quite seem to focus on anything. "I need to speak with Santa," the man said to Amy. "Adults don't usually sit with Santa," Amy replied politely. "But if you'd like a photo for a joke or something." "It's not a joke." The man's voice was flat, emotionless. "I need to give Santa a message." Vincent, overhearing, gestured the man over. Up close, the man smelled wrong, like old coins and standing water. His skin had a waxy quality, and his eyes, when they finally focused on Vincent, were completely black, no white visible at all. "What message?" Vincent asked, trying to maintain his jolly Santa demeanor. The man leaned close, whispered something in a language Vincent didn't recognize, and then walked away without another word. Vincent felt cold where the man's breath had touched his ear, and the words, though incomprehensible, seemed to echo in his mind, repeating in a loop. That night, Vincent had nightmares. He dreamed of chimneys, but he was inside them, stuck, unable to move, smoke and ash choking him. He dreamed of children's faces, but their eyes were empty, and their mouths open too wide. He woke at 3 a.m. gasping, his Santa beard soaked with sweat, though he'd forgotten to take it off. The next day, things got strange. The first child to visit Santa, a 5-year-old named Tommy, sat on Vincent's lap and immediately began crying. "You're not Santa," Tommy sobbed. "You're something else. You're the bad one." Vincent tried to comfort him, but the child scrambled away, terrified. His mother shot Vincent an accusatory glare and left quickly. This happened 3 more times that day. Children who'd been excited to see Santa took one look at Vincent and became hysterical, screaming, refusing to get close. "Maybe you're just having an off day," Amy suggested, but she looked unsettled too. That evening, after the mall closed, Vincent stayed late to adjust his costume and makeup, thinking perhaps something about his appearance was scaring the children. As he sat in his throne, the mall lights dimming for the night, he heard footsteps. A child emerged from the shadows. A little girl in a red dress, perhaps 7 years old, with blonde hair in pigtails. She walked straight to Vincent and climbed onto his lap without hesitation. "I want to tell Santa my wishes," she said. "Of course, sweetie, but the mall is closed. Where are your parents?" "I don't have parents anymore, not since I visited Santa last year." Vincent felt a chill. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Santa knows who I am. Don't you, Santa?" She looked up at him, and her eyes were black, just like the strange man's eyes. Her smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. "You're not a real child," Vincent whispered. "And you're not the real Santa. Not yet. But you will be soon. He's coming, you know. The real one. The old one. The one from before the stories changed. He wants his job back. Sarah climbed down and walked back into the shadows, disappearing. Vincent ran after her, but found nothing. Security footage later showed Vincent sitting alone in his throne, talking to empty air. The next day, Vincent called in sick. But that night, he woke to find himself standing in his backyard, still in his Santa costume, covered in soot and ash. His hands were scraped and bleeding, nails torn as if he'd been clawing at something. He had no memory of leaving his bed. He tried to quit, but when he called the mall manager, his voice wouldn't work properly. The words came out wrong, distorted, and what he heard himself saying was, "I'll be there tomorrow." Santa never breaks his promise. He drove to the mall in a daze, unable to stop himself. He sat in his throne, and children came, but now they weren't afraid. They whispered things to him, terrible things, wishes no child should voice. They wanted people to disappear, to suffer, to die. And Vincent heard himself promising to grant these wishes, his voice deeper, raspier, not his own. Amy noticed the change. "Vincent, are you okay? You sound different." He wanted to scream for help, but his mouth smiled and his voice said, "I've never been better." That night, December 15th, the strange man returned. He approached Vincent's throne after closing, and this time, Vincent saw him clearly. The suit was Victorian era, moth-eaten, ancient. The man's face was not just gaunt, but skeletal, skin stretched over bone, those black eyes deep as wells. "It's almost time," the man said. "The transformation needs 3 more nights. On Christmas Eve, you'll be complete. You'll be what this mall needs, what every mall needs. The real Santa, the one who punishes, the one who collects." "Collects what?" Vincent's voice asked, though he didn't will it to speak. "Debts. Every wish has a price. Every gift demands payment. For centuries, the truth was forgotten, the story sanitized, made safe for children. But the old ways persist. Someone must be Santa. Someone must wear the red suit and collect what's owed." Vincent felt something moving under his skin, something spreading from where the man had whispered in his ear days ago. His reflection in a nearby store window showed him sitting in his throne, but his Santa suit was no longer the bright red polyester costume he'd worn for years. It was darker, older, the fabric like dried blood. And his face beneath the white beard was changing, elongating, the flesh pulling tight against his skull. "Help me," Vincent tried to say, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. The children kept coming over the next days. Vincent sat in his throne, trapped inside his own body, watching himself interact with them. Some children were normal, innocent, and to them, he appeared as the jolly Santa they expected. But others, children with darkness in their hearts, children who'd been hurt or who'd learned to hurt others, they saw the truth. They saw what Vincent was becoming, and they whispered their terrible wishes. And he promised fulfillment. Amy grew increasingly concerned. "Vincent, seriously, you need to see a doctor. You look sick. Your eyes, they're bloodshot, almost black. And the way you talk to some of these kids, I've heard you. It's not right." On December 23rd, Vincent managed to write a note with his left hand, while his right hand waved at children. His left was still his own, somehow not yet transformed. The note said, "Stop me, call police, not myself, trapped inside." He slipped it to Amy, who read it with growing horror. She looked at Vincent, really looked at him, and saw past the costume and makeup. She saw the thing he was becoming, the sunken face, the blackening eyes, the fingers growing long and claw-like. She ran. She found mall security, but when they came to investigate, Vincent appeared completely normal. Jolly, professional, nothing wrong. The security guards laughed it off, suggesting Amy had been working too many hours. She quit on the spot, refusing to return. Vincent's last night as himself, or mostly himself, was Christmas Eve. The mall stayed open until 6 p.m., and then Vincent was supposed to make one final appearance at 7 p.m. for a special Evening with Santa event. 50 children were scheduled. At 6:30 p.m., Vincent's transformation completed. He felt the last piece of himself being swallowed by whatever had been growing inside him since the man's whispered words. He looked in the mirror and saw a horror. The red suit was now tattered and stained, the beard was yellowed, and his face was a leering skull with eyes like bottomless pits. But when others looked at him, they saw what they expected to see. The new elf assistant, Amy's replacement, smiled at him. "Ready for the last event, Santa?" The children began arriving with their parents. Most saw the jolly Santa, but a few, the ones who were sensitive, who could see beyond the surface. They screamed. Parents assumed their children were overtired, overwhelmed. They forced them to sit with Santa anyway. Vincent, trapped somewhere deep inside, felt the thing wearing his body make promises, and these promises would be kept. The children who wished for harm, who wanted cruelty, they would receive it. The debts would be collected, the old ways would return, one mall at a time, one Santa at a time, spreading like an infection. The event ended at 9 p.m. The thing that had been Vincent Hardy walked out of Pinewood Mall into the December night. It climbed into Vincent's car and drove away. Security footage shows the car leaving the parking lot, but it never arrived at Vincent's home. The car was found 3 days later in a forest preserve, empty, the Santa suit folded neatly in the back seat. Vincent Hardy was never seen again. A new Santa started at Pinewood Mall the following Christmas season, a man named Robert Marsh. He was professional, friendly, good with kids. But after a few weeks, children started having nightmares about their mall Santa visit. Some reported that Santa's eyes turned black when he smiled. Others said Santa whispered things to them in a language they didn't understand, but that echoed in their minds. And on December 12th, exactly 1 year after Vincent's transformation began, a tall, thin man in a dark suit was seen approaching the Santa setup. He spoke to Robert Marsh, leaned in close, whispered something. Robert's hand went to his ear, a look of confusion crossing his face. The cycle continues. Every Christmas season, in malls across the country, men and women take jobs as Santa Claus. Most remain themselves, innocent, bringing joy to children. But a few, the ones visited by the man in the dark suit, begin to change. They become something older, something from before the stories were sanitized, something that remembers when Santa didn't just reward the good, but punished the wicked, collected debts, demanded payment. And somewhere, Vincent Hardy still exists, in a way. Part of a collective, a legion of transformed Santas, eternally Christmas Eve, in whatever dimensional space they inhabit, eternally visiting children through the ones who wear the red suit, eternally whispering promises that should never be kept, collecting debts that should never come due, perpetuating a Christmas tradition far older and darker than anyone wants to believe. Story 6. The Snow Globe Collection. Philip Brennan was an accountant, methodical and precise, living alone in a Victorian house in Salem, Massachusetts. At 43, he'd devoted his life to order and routine. His one indulgence was collecting snow globes, a hobby inherited from his grandmother. He had over 200 globes, each one cataloged, displayed on custom shelving throughout his home. They ranged from cheap tourist trinkets to valuable antiques, depicting scenes from cities around the world. On December 8th, 2020, Philip attended an estate sale in a mansion outside Salem. The house had belonged to Evelyn Marsh, a recluse who died at 97 with no surviving family. Her collection of antiques and oddities filled the cavernous rooms, and Philip was delighted to find an entire room dedicated to snow globes. Most were ordinary, but one caught his attention immediately. It sat on a high shelf, larger than the others, perhaps 8 inches in diameter. The base was made of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols Philip didn't recognize. Inside the glass globe was a perfect miniature Victorian house, 3 stories, with tiny windows that seemed to glow from within. The snow inside wasn't the typical white glitter. It had a strange iridescent quality, catching light in ways that seemed physically impossible. "How much for this one?" Philip asked the estate sale attendant. The woman, a granddaughter of Evelyn's friend, looked at the globe and frowned. "That one's not supposed to be for sale. Evelyn left specific instructions that it should be destroyed." "Destroyed? Why?" "She didn't say, just that it was dangerous." Philip laughed. "It's a snow globe. How dangerous can it be?" The woman shrugged. "I'm not supposed to sell it, but honestly, if you want it, make an offer. I'd rather get rid of it than deal with disposing of it." Philip bought it for $50, a bargain for something so beautifully crafted. He took it home and placed it in his study on the mantelpiece, the position of honor in his collection. That evening, he examined it closely under a magnifying glass. The detail was extraordinary. The miniature house had individual shingles on the roof, tiny curtains in the windows, a wreath on the front door. The yard had miniature trees, a fence, even a small mailbox. And in one window, on the second floor, Philip could see a figure, a tiny person standing motionless, looking out. He shook the globe, and the iridescent snow swirled in hypnotic patterns. As it settled, he could have sworn the figure in the window had moved to a different position. He shook it again, watching carefully. Yes, the figure definitely moved, shifting from the window to what appeared to be the center of the room. "Clever mechanism," Philip muttered, assuming it was some kind of trick built into the globe. That night, Philip had vivid dreams. He walked through rooms in a Victorian house, his house, but the layout was different. Additional rooms existed where they shouldn't. Hallways stretched longer than possible. Doors opened to spaces that defied geometry. And everywhere, he felt watched, observed by something just out of sight. He woke at 3 a.m. to find himself standing in his study, holding the snow globe. He had no memory of getting out of bed or walking downstairs. The globe felt warm in his hands, almost pulsing. Inside, the miniature house was dark except for one lit window on the 3rd floor. A figure stood there, and even through the curve of glass and the distortion of miniature scale, Philip could tell it was looking directly at him. He set the globe down quickly and went back to bed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Over the next days, Philip noticed changes. His house felt different. Rooms seemed slightly off in their proportions. He'd lived here for 15 years and knew every inch, but now he found himself disoriented, turning down the hallway to his bedroom and ending up at the bathroom instead. Doors he remembered being on the left were on the right. The layout was shifting, subtly, constantly, and the snow globe changed too. Each morning, the scene inside was different. The house gained additions, a new wing, a tower, a conservatory. The yard expanded, acquired structures, a gazebo, a fountain, and the figures multiplied. What had been one person became 2, then 5, then a dozen tiny figures positioned throughout the miniature house and grounds. On December 15th, Philip found a room in his house he didn't remember. He'd gone downstairs for coffee, taken a turn he'd made thousands of times, but this time it led to a door he'd never seen. Beyond was a small parlor decorated in Victorian style, furniture he didn't own, wallpaper he'd never chosen. Portraits hung on the walls. People in old-fashioned dress staring with severe expressions. He backed out of the room, heart racing. and when he looked again, the door was gone. Just wall, as if the room had never existed. He examined the snow globe and found the miniature house now contained a new room in exactly the position where he'd found the real room in his house. And a tiny figure stood in that miniature parlor, looking up at him. Philip decided to get rid of the globe. He wrapped it in newspaper, placed it in a box, and drove to the nearest donation center. But when he opened the box to remove it, the globe was gone. Just crumpled newspaper. He drove home to find it back on his mantelpiece, pristine, mocking him. He tried to smash it, bringing down a hammer on the glass. The hammer bounced off without leaving a mark, the impact vibrating through his arms painfully. He tried throwing it out windows, burying it in his backyard, abandoning it on the side of the highway. Each time, he returned home to find it waiting on the mantelpiece. The house continued changing. New rooms appeared and disappeared. Hallways extended into impossible spaces. Philip found stairs leading to places that shouldn't exist. A ballroom on what should have been his roof. A library beneath his basement that went down 7 levels. An observatory that looked out on a sky that wasn't the sky above Salem, but something else. Somewhere else. And the figures in the snow globe multiplied. Dozens of them now, then hundreds. Tiny people arranged throughout an increasingly elaborate miniature world. Philip realized with horror that he recognized some of them. The Victorian-dressed people from the portraits in the Phantom Parlor, and others, recent figures in modern clothes, including an old woman who looked disturbingly like photos he'd seen of Evelyn Marsh. On December 22nd, Philip understood. The snow globe didn't contain a miniature house. It was a portal, or perhaps a prison, for a place that existed in parallel to his house. Every person who'd owned the globe had been slowly pulled into that place, their physical form compressed and trapped in the miniature world while their house expanded to accommodate the otherworldly architecture bleeding through. He found documentation in what should have been his attic, but was now a vast archive filled with journals and letters. Previous owners had left records. The globe had existed for at least 200 years, passing through families, destroying each owner. Those who tried to destroy it were pulled in immediately. Those who tried to ignore it were taken more slowly. The only way to survive was to pass it on to someone else before the absorption was complete, transferring the curse. But Philip couldn't do that. He couldn't inflict this on another person. He decided he would be the last. He would let himself be taken rather than pass the horror forward. Christmas Eve, Philip sat in his study, watching the snow globe. The miniature world inside had grown vast, no longer just a house, but an entire landscape of buildings and streets and impossible architecture. Hundreds of tiny figures moved through it, trapped, eternally living in that compressed space. At midnight, Philip felt the pull. His body began to feel strange, compressed, distant. The room around him grew larger, or he grew smaller. He looked down at his hands and saw them becoming translucent, miniature. The snow globe dominated his vision, growing to fill his entire world, and then he was falling into it, through the glass that was no longer solid, into the iridescent snow. He landed in the Victorian house, full-sized from his perspective, but he knew he was now miniature, trapped in the globe. Other figures surrounded him, people in clothes from different eras, all wearing the same expression of resigned horror. They'd been here for years, decades, centuries, living in this compressed space, aware of the real world outside the glass, but unable to reach it. An old woman approached him. Evelyn Marsh. "I tried to warn everyone," she said. "I wanted it destroyed, but I knew whoever tried would be taken immediately. You bought it anyway." "How long have you been here?" Philip asked. 3 years, but time is different inside. It feels like decades. You'll learn." Philip walked through the house, his house, but perfected and trapped in miniature. Every room he'd ever had, and every phantom room that had appeared. He understood now. The globe didn't create these spaces. It absorbed them, pulled them from reality, and compressed them, collecting architecture and people, building an impossible world inside glass and snow. Philip Brennan's body was never found. His house sat empty for months before being sold. The new owners, a young family, found a beautiful snow globe on the mantelpiece. Inside was an incredibly detailed Victorian house with miniature figures, including one that looked remarkably like a small man in modern clothes, standing at a window, looking out with an expression of desperate warning. The father, Charles Morrison, was charmed by it. "This is beautiful. The kids will love it." His wife agreed. They kept it, shaking it occasionally to watch the iridescent snow swirl. And sometimes, if they looked closely, they could see the tiny figures moving, rearranging themselves, as if trying to communicate something. But it was just a snow globe, a beautiful antique, a perfect addition to their Christmas decorations. And in the study late at night, Charles sometimes found doors that shouldn't exist, rooms that weren't there before, hallways that stretched too long, and the snow globe on his mantelpiece grew more elaborate each day, the miniature world inside expanding, waiting patiently to add new residents to its eternal compressed Christmas, a holiday that never ends, trapped forever in glass and snow. Story 7, The Christmas Letter. Owen Blackwell was a postal worker in Asheville, North Carolina, working the holiday rush during December 2019. At 29, he'd been with the post office for 6 years, long enough to know the rhythms of the season. December meant overtime, endless packages, letters to Santa, and exhausted co-workers. Owen didn't mind. The extra money helped, and he found something satisfying about ensuring people received their holiday correspondence. On December 19th, during the morning sort, Owen noticed an unusual letter. It was addressed to him specifically. Owen Blackwell, postal worker, Asheville, NC. No return address, no postage, no cancellation mark. It had simply appeared in his bin mixed with regular mail. The envelope was old-fashioned, made of thick, cream-colored paper, sealed with red wax bearing an intricate symbol. Owen opened it during his break. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message in beautiful, old-fashioned script. Dear Owen, you have been chosen to deliver a special Christmas message. Every year, one postal worker is selected to ensure certain letters reach their destinations. These are not ordinary letters. They contain truths that must be delivered. You will recognize them when you see them. You must deliver them all before Christmas Eve, midnight. Failure will result in you taking the place of the sender. Do not ignore this. The letters are already in your possession. Merry Christmas. Owen laughed, assuming it was a prank from a coworker. But when he returned to his route preparation, he noticed 3 letters in his bag that he hadn't sorted himself. They were identical to the one he'd received. Cream-colored envelopes, red wax seals, no postage marks. Each was addressed to someone on his route. The first was for Margaret Chen at 447 Ridgeway Drive. Owen delivered it that afternoon. Mrs. Chen was 72, a widow who always tipped at Christmas. She opened the letter while Owen waited with her package signature. Her face went white. She looked at Owen with an expression of pure terror. "How did you get this? Who sent this?" "I don't know, ma'am. It was just in my..." She slammed the door in his face. Through the window, Owen saw her collapse into a chair, reading and rereading the letter, tears streaming down her face. The second letter was for Thomas Brennan at 1203 Maple Street. Thomas was 45, an attorney, intimidating and curt. He took the letter without comment, but before Owen had left the porch, he heard Thomas scream from inside the house. Owen rushed back and knocked. Thomas opened the door, ashen, trembling. Who told you? Thomas demanded. This information, it's impossible. No one knows. No one could know. I'm just delivering mail, Owen said. I don't know what the letters say. Thomas looked at the envelope, at the wax seal. What are these? Where did they come from? Owen had no answers. Thomas closed the door, and Owen heard sobbing from inside. The third letter was for a woman named Patricia Yates at 892 Crescent Avenue. She wasn't home, so Owen left it in her mailbox. He'd check tomorrow to see if she'd received it. That evening, Owen found more letters in his bag, 5 of them appearing between the time he'd checked at his last stop and when he returned to the post office. Cream envelopes, red wax seals, addresses for people on tomorrow's route. Owen tried to ignore the original letter's warning, but curiosity consumed him. He held one of the sealed envelopes up to the light, trying to see through the thick paper. Nothing. He considered opening one, but something stopped him. The wax seal seemed to pulse slightly, the symbol shifting in the light, and touching it made his fingers tingle uncomfortably. The next day, December 20th, Owen delivered the 5 letters. Each recipient had the same reaction: shock, terror, and an immediate question about who had sent the letter. One woman, Sarah Henderson, demanded Owen open her letter and read it to prove he didn't know the contents. He broke the wax seal and unfolded the paper. The letter was handwritten, like the one he'd received, but the content was specific to Sarah. Dear Sarah, 20 years ago, you took something that didn't belong to you. A life. The baby you claimed was stillborn was alive. You gave her away and told your husband she'd died. She's still alive, and she's looking for you. Your lies are ending. This Christmas, the truth will find you. Signed, the sender. Sarah's face crumpled. Who could possibly? Owen felt sick. He'd just exposed someone's deepest secret. He handed her the letter and left quickly. Behind him, he heard her husband asking what the letter said, her desperate attempts to explain, his rising voice. More letters appeared. Every day, Owen found them in his bag. 10, 15, 20 letters with red wax seals, each one addressed to someone on his route. And each delivery resulted in the same pattern: shock, denial, terror. Owen realized the letters contained secrets, things people had hidden for years or decades. The knowledge was impossible, specific, undeniable. On December 23rd, Owen found 30 letters. He couldn't deliver them all in one day, not with his regular route. He worked until 10 p.m., past any reasonable hours, desperate to complete the task. The original letter's warning echoed in his mind. Deliver them all before Christmas Eve, midnight. Failure will result in you taking the place of the sender. He delivered 27. 3 remained at 11:45 p.m. on December 23rd. He drove frantically across town, running to doors, shoving letters into mailboxes, not caring about protocol. The last letter was delivered at 11:57 p.m. to a house on the outskirts of town. He felt relief, then immediate dread. Because in his truck, sitting on the passenger seat where nothing had been moments before, was one more letter. Cream envelope, red wax seal. Addressed to Owen Blackwell, 3349, Riverside Apartment 4B, Asheville, NC. He opened it with shaking hands. Dear Owen, you have successfully delivered this year's letters. The truths have been distributed. Lives will change, secrets will emerge, and the balance will be maintained. You have fulfilled your duty. But know this, you are now marked. Every year, you will find letters. Every year, you will deliver truths that destroy and rebuild lives. You can quit the post office, move anywhere, change your name. The letters will find you. This is your purpose now. You are the deliverer. You will carry this burden until you find someone to take your place, which you cannot do intentionally. They must choose it themselves, as you did by opening the first letter. Merry Christmas, Owen. Your first year is complete. Many more await. The sender. Owen sat in his truck in the December cold, engine idling, breath fogging the windows. He thought about quitting, about refusing to deliver any more letters. But he knew, deep in his bones, that it didn't matter. The letters would come. He was trapped in a cycle he couldn't break, cursed or chosen to expose secrets, to force truths into the light regardless of the damage. He drove to Margaret Chen's house, the first recipient. He needed to know what the letters said, what truths they contained. But when he arrived, the house was dark, a "for sale" sign planted in the yard. Neighbors said Mrs. Chen had left town suddenly, no explanation. Thomas Brennan's law office was closed, a notice on the door saying he'd taken an indefinite leave of absence. Patricia Yates had checked into a psychiatric facility. Sarah Henderson was in the middle of a divorce. Every person who'd received a letter had experienced life-altering consequences. Marriages ended, careers destroyed, legal troubles surfacing, family revelations tearing relationships apart. The letters were destroying lives with truth, and Owen was responsible. He'd delivered them. He was complicit in whatever entity or force was behind this, weaponizing truth, using him as the vector. Christmas Day, Owen stayed in his apartment, door locked, curtains drawn. His phone rang constantly. Coworkers, supervisors, even police wanting to question him about several recipients who'd mentioned unusual letters. He ignored them all. But on December 26th, he found more letters. They weren't in his truck or his mailbox. They simply appeared throughout his apartment, on his kitchen counter, his bathroom sink, his bedside table. Dozens of them, all addressed to people he didn't know, in cities across the country. The message was clear. His deliveries weren't limited to his postal route anymore. The scope was expanding. He was expected to travel, to deliver these truth bombs nationally, maybe internationally. Owen tried to burn them. He piled the letters in his bathtub and lit them with a match. The paper wouldn't catch. The flames couldn't touch them. He tried tearing them, soaking them in water, cutting them with scissors. The envelopes remained pristine, indestructible. He had no choice. He began traveling, using his savings and vacation time, delivering letters across North Carolina, then to neighboring states. Each delivery was the same: shock, horror, lives detonating. He stopped reading the contents, stopped thinking of recipients as people. He became mechanical, efficient, just delivering mail. Months passed. Owen aged rapidly, stress and guilt hollowing him out. He lost weight. His hair began graying despite his youth. The letters never stopped. Sometimes he found 5 in a day, sometimes 50. There was no pattern, no way to anticipate them. He tried to find the sender, researching the symbol on the wax seals, searching for others who'd been trapped in this same cycle. He found hints, stories passed through generations of postal workers, the deliverers, people marked to carry truth, cursed to destroy lives with exposure. Some had lasted decades. Others had gone mad. None had escaped. One night, December 2020, 1 year after his first letter, Owen stood on a bridge considering ending it. But he knew even death wouldn't release him. The letters would find another deliverer, pass the burden to someone who'd touched the wrong envelope, opened the wrong seal. He stepped back from the edge and kept walking. He'd deliver the letters. He'd carry the burden. Because the alternative, letting someone else be marked, be destroyed by this curse, was worse. This was his punishment and his purpose, delivering truths that shouldn't be known, exposing secrets that people had the right to keep, all in service of some cosmic balance he didn't understand and didn't believe in. Owen Blackwell still works for the post office, though he's requested transfers to different cities repeatedly, trying to outrun the letters. They always find him. If you receive a cream-colored envelope with a red wax seal, no postage, no return address, don't open it. The truth inside will destroy you. But you will open it, because humans can't resist. because we think truth is always valuable, always necessary. And somewhere, Owen is walking a route, carrying a bag of letters, each one a grenade of truth, each delivery an act of destruction masquerading as revelation. He hates what he does, hates what he's become, but he continues, day after day, year after year, the deliverer, ensuring that secrets die and lives burn, one Christmas letter at a time.